called it Libertalia, legend, whispered among sailors, rebels, and dreamers. A haven for those who refused to kneel. But was it just a story, a sailor's yarn spun over a bottle of rum? Or was it something more? A rare place, a bold experiment in freedom that history tried to forget. Today, we're setting sail into the heart of this mystery, charting a course through historical records, whispered legends, and the radical ideas that fueled the golden age of piracy. Forget what you think you know about pirates, Dave! This isn't just about treasure chests and skull and crossbones. This is the story of a dreamer dream of a world without kings, without masters, without chains. This is the story of Libertalia. To understand Libertalia, we first have to understand the world that supposedly created it. The late 17th and early 18th centuries were an era of empires. European powers carved up the globe, and life for a common sailor was brutal. On a naval or merchant vessel, you were subject to the whims of a tyrannical captain, meager pay, and the constant threat of the lash. The conditions were horrific: cramped quarters, disease, and back-breaking labor. You were essentially property, a cog in the machine of empire and trade. It's no wonder so many chose to mutiny, to go on the account as they called it. Piracy wasn't just about greed. For many, it was a desperate act of rebellion. It was a choice for a better life, or at least a life lived on their own terms, even if it was a short one. Into this world of oppression sails the legend of Captain James Smith. The story, first published in 1724 in Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, tells of a Frenchman from a noble family. Unlike his peers, Misson was educated and deeply influenced by radical new ideas of liberty and equality. While serving in the French Navy, he met a former priest named Carve, a man who had shed his faith for a new kind of gospel, one that preached against tyranny, monarchy, and private property. He argued that every man was born free, with a right to the earth's bounty. To Misson, these weren't just abstract philosophies, they were a call to action. Together, they convinced the crew of their ship, the Victoire, to mutiny. They weren't just pirates, they were liberators. They pulled down the French flag and raised their own white banner with the motto "For God and Liberty." They didn't plunder for personal wealth. Instead, they attacked slave ships, freeing the captives and welcoming them into their ranks as equals. Their creed was simple: all men are created equal, regardless of race, nationality, or creed. They shared their spoils equally, made decisions through democratic votes, and abolished all forms of hierarchy and oppression they had known. They were building a new society on the high seas, a floating republic of the dispossessed. They called themselves Liberi the Free. Their journey wasn't just about escaping the old world. It was about building a new one, a sanctuary for all who yearned to breathe free. Their ultimate goal: to find a place to drop anchor for good. According to the legend, they found their promised land on the coast of Madagascar, a lush, isolated bay, hidden from the prying eyes of empires. Here, they founded Libertalia. The name itself was a declaration: the land of the free. It was a fortified town, a society built from the ground up on the principles they had forged at sea. There were no kings, no slaves, no money in the traditional sense. Everything was held in common, a central treasury for the good of the community. Laws were made by a council of elected representatives, and every man, regardless of his origin, be he a European deserter or a freed African slave, had an equal voice. 2. This was a radical vision, an anarchist utopia brought to life by the very people the world had cast out. Imagine it: a bustling settlement where different languages mixed freely in the marketplaces. Former sailors, slaves, and outcasts from a dozen nations, working side by side, building homes and fortifications. They established a common language, a mix of French, English, Dutch, and Malagasy. They elected a wise pirate named Thomas Chew as their first leader, not a king, but an admiral to guide their defense. They weren't just raiding, They were building a nation. They farmed the land, managed their resources collectively, and prepared to defend their haven against a world that would never accept their existence. Libertalia was more than a pirate cove. It was a political statement, a living, breathing challenge to the entire social order of the 18th century. But could such a paradise last? Legend, as told by Johnson, ends in tragedy. The utopian dream was shattered by an unexpected attack from the native people of Madagascar. The settlement was sacked, its inhabitants scattered. Captain Meeson himself was said to have died at sea shortly after, his ship lost in a storm. The great experiment was over. Libertalia, the haven for the free and the brave, vanished, swallowed by the jungle and the sea, leaving behind only a story. A powerful, intoxicating story, but just a story nonetheless. And that brings us to the great debate that has raged for centuries. Was Libertalia real? Modern historians are highly skeptical. The primary and really only source for the story is Captain Charles Johnson's book. And the identity of Captain Charles Johnson is itself a mystery. Many scholars believe it was a pseudonym for Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe. Defoe was known for his realistic fiction, for blending fact and fantasy so seamlessly that it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. The story of Meeson and his philosophical priest, Kurak Sholi, feels a bit too perfect, bit too much, like a political allegory designed to explore radical ideas safely disguised as a pirate tale. There are no other contemporary accounts, no archaeological evidence, no mention of Libertalia in the logs of any navy or merchant vessel from the era. From a purely historical standpoint, the case for Libertalia is incredibly weak. But what if we're asking the wrong question? Maybe the point isn't whether Libertalia existed as a physical place on a map. Maybe its true power lies in the ideas it represents. Too. The golden age of piracy was undeniably a time of radical social experimentation. Pirate ships were, in many ways, some of the most democratic places on Earth at the time. Captains were elected and could be deposed by a vote. Crews drew up their own articles, their own constitutions, which guaranteed a fair division of plunder and provided a form of social security for injured shipmates. They were multi-ethnic and multinational, often welcoming escaped slaves and outcasts as equals. What if Libertalia wasn't a single settlement, but a metaphor for the entire pirate ethos? The ideas of Libertalia democracy, equality, social justice didn't just appear out of thin air. They were part of a growing current of radical thought that would eventually explode in the American and French revolutions. The pirates, living on the fringes of society, were among the first to put these ideas into practice. They created their own floating commonwealths, their own miniature utopias, on their ships. Perhaps Libertalia was the name given to this shared dream, this network of rebels who proved that another way of life was possible. The legend might be fictional, but the spirit behind it was very, very real. It was the spirit of defiance, the belief that freedom was worth fighting for and dying for. So, was Libertalia a real place? Probably not. The story as we know it is likely a work of fiction, a brilliant piece of political literature disguised as an adventure story. But does that make it any less important? Absolutely not. The legend of Libertalia captures the revolutionary heart of the golden age of piracy. It reminds us that history is often written by the victors, and that the stories of rebels and dreamers are easily erased. Whether it was a real colony or just a dream, Libertalia speaks to a timeless human desire for a world free from oppression, a world built on liberty and justice for all. It was a myth born from a very real struggle. Libertalia, where freedom was more than a word. It was a way of life. Thanks so much for joining us on this voyage into the past. What do you think? Was Libertalia a real place or a powerful idea? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden corners of history, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more adventures. Until next time, stay curious.